Today, we're going to unpack a really fascinating idea from neuroscience, something that explains so much about how we feel inside. It's called predictive narrowing. You know that feeling, right? Maybe you get a knot in your stomach before a totally routine meeting, or you find your mind just goes blank in a social setting that is objectively completely fine. That internal sense of restriction, when everything on the outside seems calm, that's exactly what we're going to get into today. So, at its core, predictive narrowing is all about your brain acting on a forecast. It's this preemptive tightening of our mental and emotional resources, all based on a prediction of what might be coming, rather than a reaction to what's happening right now, in this moment. Okay, to really get this, we first have to wrap our heads around a core concept. Our brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. It isn't just sitting back and passively taking in information. No, it's constantly, actively trying to guess what's going to happen next. Think about it. Every single thing you've ever experienced gets logged away and used to build this intricate internal map of the world. And this map helps your brain make these incredibly fast, educated guesses. It saves a ton of energy and allows for really rapid responses. It's a massive evolutionary advantage. It's a feature, not a bug. And this is huge. The work of neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett shows just how profoundly influential these predictions are. You see, they don't just shape our thoughts. They actually determine where we focus our attention, how our body physically feels, and even the very emotions we experience from one moment to the next. So how on earth do these predictions become so automatic, so instantaneous? Well, the answer lies in the brain's physical structure, in what we can think of as our neural pathways, which are like well-worn roads. Let's use an analogy. Imagine walking through a field for the very first time. You leave behind a faint trail in the grass. Now, imagine walking that exact same trail 1,000 times. It becomes a deep, clear, easy-to-follow path, doesn't it? Well, neural circuits work in exactly the same way. The more a particular pattern of brain cells gets activated, the stronger and more efficient that connection becomes. This all boils down to a famous principle, summed up beautifully by Donald Hebb way back in 1949. It isn't just some catchy phrase. It's the fundamental rule for how our brain learns and forms habits. Repetition literally builds the connection. The process itself is actually pretty straightforward. First, an experience triggers some kind of neural response. If that same pairing happens over and over again, the brain reinforces that specific pathway. Eventually, it becomes the default setting, so fast and so efficient that the response can be triggered automatically, often before our conscious mind even has time to catch up. All right, so what happens when these automatic pathways get tangled up with a sense of threat? This is where we see the brain shifting the entire nervous system into a protective state, what the traffic light processing framework calls the orange nervous system state. And this is the essence of predictive narrowing. The brain predicts danger based on its old map. In response, it moves the nervous system into the orange state, amping up vigilance, tension, and readiness, even if the current environment is perfectly safe. The whole system is responding to the prediction, not the reality. Now, it's really important to see how this is different from a standard stress response. Reactive narrowing is a direct response to a real present danger. The system goes into the orange state, and then, crucially, it recovers when the threat is gone. With predictive narrowing, on the other hand, the trigger is internal. That feeling of constraints can linger and linger because the threat is being generated by the brain's own forecast. So, what does this actually feel like in day-to-day life? Well, it can show up in a lot of ways. It might look like social anxiety that makes conversations feel impossible, or that chronic tension you feel in a place that really should be relaxing. It's that nagging, low-level sense of being mentally fenced in, and it's driven by what might happen, not by what is. Okay, I know this might all sound a bit discouraging, but here is where the story takes a really powerful and hopeful turn. The very same mechanisms that create these patterns are also the ones that give us the ability to change them. So if our old neural pathways are these well-worn roads, the most crucial thing to remember is this. The brain never, ever loses its ability to build new ones. It is literally designed to adapt. This change happens thanks to two amazing mechanisms. First, we have neuroplasticity, which is just the brain's lifelong capacity to rewire itself based on new experiences. And second, we have something called prediction error. This happens when an expected negative outcome just doesn't happen. With enough repetition, These mismatches send a powerful signal to the brain that its old map might be outdated and needs an update. But, and this is a really big but, there is one critical condition for this whole updating process to work. The nervous system has to have sufficient regulation. It can't be in a high-threat orange state. Why? Because if the system is too activated, the brain is focused purely on survival, not on learning. It just doubles down on the old threat prediction. So regulation is what creates the space and the capacity for the brain to actually learn something new. Which brings us to our key takeaway: understanding how we can really help the brain to update its internal map. It is so vital to see predictive narrowing not as a flaw or some kind of weakness, but as a misguided attempt at protection. The brain is simply running an old safety program based on the data it has. In a way, it's a sign of a brain that learned very effectively from its past. And that leads us to the final empowering question. If our brain is running on old software, how do we go about installing an update? The answer is beautifully simple, though that doesn't always mean it's easy. The brain learned its predictions through experience, and so it can only update those predictions through new lived experience. By repeatedly and safely having experiences that contradict the old forecast, we provide the brain with the new data it needs to gradually and powerfully redraw its map of the world.